We are back with another episode of Boots, Balls and Bras with myself, Fara Williams, and the amazing Anita Asante. Neat, busy week ahead for you.
Yeah, busy week. Away currently with the England women's under 23s in sunny Spain. So
Lucky
I'm loving
you.
it right now. Bit of vitamin D, so happy days. But yeah, plenty of exciting games to look forward to. So
what games are they?
So we're playing Spain, and then we'll probably either play Belgium or Sweden in the second game. But just, good opposition, a good chance for our players to test themselves against really good teams and, see how we do.
But that's more exciting than me. I've been doing my gardening, trying to tidy it up ready for barbecue season. But Nate, before we go into WSL, there was a couple of shocks over the weekend. Certainly in our accumulator anyway, that we got wrong again. But we have to talk about the Women's Champions League. Midweek, Arsenal come from 2-0 down to beat Real Madrid at home 3-0, and Chelsea did the comeback the next day against Manchester City, again from a 2-0 down, and managed to beat them 3-0. But what did you make of the two games in general?
Yeah, I think if we start with the Arsenal game, I think it shows you what pitch quality can do for a team. As well, just the conditions were obviously favourable for a ball possessing team like Arsenal, who like to have those fluid movements and that sort of like connectivity in their play. A really dominant display from them, obviously standout performances as well from Alessia Russo, getting a hat trick and Chloe Kelly assisting in both those occasions as well. A team that seems really full of belief and confidence, which is good to see. And I'm sure now, having gotten that result, showing that they can come back as well as another tool to their armory, they'll be feeling pretty confident, I think, going into the next round, in the semi-final Champions League.
And what about the Chelsea comeback?
Yeah, listen, I said in my column earlier that week, you can never rule out Chelsea. It's just a fact. They're mentality monsters. I had every kind of sense that they would find a way to get the result, especially at home. And I just think that they're a team, like when you've got players like Erin Cuthbert in your team, who is like dying for the cause, you know what it's like, Faz. These players are just like, they'll do everything to make sure they can get the result, that they can score a goal, all of that. I thought it was a really enjoyable game. But again, like I said, I just feel like Chelsea have every side of their game where they can be adaptable. They can utilize the rotations in their team, having players come in the team, out the team, and still perform to a really high level. So, at the end of it, I think, they were the worthy winners, and you can see why. That they've been here time and time again as well in Champions League. So experience as well, I think, was on their side. But a really good display from them. What was your take on those games?
Yeah, no, I thought Arsenal. I thought both of them, Arsenal and Chelsea, both phenomenal in both of those return fixtures. I think you're right in terms of the pitch clearly helped Arsenal in that return fixture. I feel like in the first leg anyway, they were in the tie. I feel like they created opportunities, even though the pitch, probably wasn't up to the the levels or standards that we expect in the women's game. But they out in Madrid, I thought they done enough to at least get a goal and bring one home. But they saved it till the return fixture. And I thought, both halves, they were very dominant. I thought the first half, dominant in terms of possession, in terms of entries, but I didn't think that I felt in terms of their movement, their dynamism, it wasn't quite there in the first half. I didn't feel like they really affected the Real Madrid back line. But I felt whatever was said at half time, they were much improved. I mean, we saw how early they came out in that second half and got that early goal. And I just thought the movement, from wide players, I mean, in the first goal, Caitlin Ford's movement in field, it affects the defenders. The fullback didn't know whether to go over, whether to hold their shape, ends up in two minds, and then they get a goal from that really early in the second half. And then, that 20-minute spell where they got the 3 goals, that they were very good. And look, I'm looking forward to their tie against Lyon on the 19th of April. And as for Chelsea, they weren't patient. They didn't leave it till the second half. They come out like a steam train and, got those 3 goals in the opening half. So, yeah, 2 completely different, I guess, approaches or outcomes in those games. But, yeah, I mean, I personally didn't think Chelsea could overturn it without Manchester City scoring. I thought, yes, they're capable of scoring goals, but not without conceding. I thought, I thought City had it in them to at least get a goal, but not on a night. And, I know Hannah Hampton pulled off a couple of good saves, but yeah, I thought worthy winners in the end. I think if you think about the 2 teams that can probably go on with the squad depth and, give a real good account of themselves and potentially get to the finals, I would have put Chelsea and Arsenal in that kind of bracket. City, with the injuries they have at the minute, probably the depth in their squad isn't quite there. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm glad that both teams obviously avoid each other. We could potentially have an all-WSL final out in Portugal, so that would be nice. But yeah, Chelsea's fixture is against Barcelona on the 20th of April, so looking forward to those first legs the weekend of the 19th and 20th of April. So I'm sure all eyes will be on them, those games. But Neats, let's take it back to WSL. Let's take it back to the weekend, because we both had spoke a lot about Aston Villa, your former team, and kind of the position they were in going into that weekend. They had an away fixture to Liverpool. The form that Liverpool were coming into that game, yes, they'd lost to Arsenal, but they'd come off the back of 2 good results in the FA Cup against Arsenal, and obviously that big win against Manchester United. I don't think either of us thought Villa would go away and pick up all 3, but they did exactly that, and they come from a goal behind. So what did you make of Aston Villa's performance?
Yeah, to be honest, obviously I'd covered their game against Man United the weekend before, and from what I saw in that game, I thought they had no hope at all of finding a result, because there was nothing to pick from that performance that I thought was positive. But obviously they've had some time to go away, probably reflect and really, pin down those details from that performance and try to improve on it. And I think they showed a lot more kind of determination against Liverpool. I think they showed a kind of more hunger in and out of possession to get pressure on the ball, to try and force chances, create a bit more, make the goalkeeper make more saves. Rachel Daly, I think, had an opportunity quite early on, and it was generally a more positive performance. But I think, utilising the strengths of those players, Ebony Salmon, Hansen, with more direct play, committing defenders, trying to exploit space, they did a lot better because they were slightly more direct. They weren't trying to, just play through the thirds and constantly and come to no outcomes in the final third. And in the previous games, the quality of their final third play is often what had let them down. And arguably the second goal, Ebony Salmon's goal, again, is an own goal, probably the third own goal from Liverpool, unfortunately, in 2 games. But the point is, you put the ball in the right areas where it's difficult for defenders to defend, situations like that can arise. So realistically, I think they needed that performance. I don't think Liverpool expected to lose that game, but it's put them in a great position now, and all the pressure is back on Crystal Palace to try and dig themselves out of this relegation hole.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree. I thought they couldn't have got off to a worse start though, Villa. I mean, the goal they conceded, the penalty, but I mean, in terms of the mistake in the build-up to that, Kerry Holland pressurising their back line, and they were just all over the place. Missy Bo-Kearns gets in the way of a square pass, it deflects, and Kerry Holland goes through, and obviously D'Angelo brings her down in the box to give away the penalty. But that was a dreadful, sort of start, and you thought, how are Villa going to come back from this? But you mentioned it there. I thought the defending in both ends for the all 3 goals wasn't great. The goal for Aston Villa, yes, they were a bit more direct. I think Hansen was only on the pitch 2.5 minutes before she got the equaliser. Again, confusion in the Liverpool back line, beat Billy easily. I mean, Rachel Laws ain't going to want me to say this, but I don't know where she was going coming out of her box so far. And yes, she cut the angle off a little bit and made the angle hard for Hansen. But, how she got that in with 2 players on the line, incredible. And that was the start of the comeback. And I think what Villa have needed in recent weeks, I think we spoke about that, they haven't had the fight with them, amongst the team for whatever reason. they have dominated possession in most of their games, and they've created chances. They just haven't been clinical. And they needed a little bit of luck, and they got that with a second goal. And as you mentioned there with Ebony Salmon, again, the defending for that, arguably not great. But she's direct. She gets on the ball. She gets herself on the ball in the box and tries to make something happen. And she does. It was an own goal, wasn't it, by Clark? Third own goal, as you mentioned, for Liverpool. But the fact that she's picked the ball up and, tried to make something happen, as you mentioned, those little bits of luck can happen when you do that. And I felt it was a massive 3 points for Aston Villa. And as you mentioned there, the pressure is back on Crystal Palace after their 4-0 defeat to Arsenal. And there's now a 4-point gap between Palace and Aston Villa. I think that gap is too big. I know there's still 4 games remaining in the WSL for both teams. But when you look at the remaining fixtures, I think that, to pick up 6 to 9 points, which is probably what Crystal Palace are going to have to do, win 3 out of 4 at least at the minimum. I'm not sure that's going to happen. And, as I said, Villa put himself in a really good position, and a position, they should have been in a lot earlier, pulled away from the bottom, given the squad that they have. But what do you make of Palace's remaining fixtures in terms of, 4 games? You think they have a possibility of getting 9 points from those 4 remaining games?
Honestly, no, I think it's going to be really tough now looking at it. You've got Chelsea. They got Chelsea away in the next fixture. After that, you got West Ham, who are in form, you could say, in an upward trajectory. Leicester also, who are finding results against teams in and around them as well. Then you got Man City, final day. Like, you couldn't ask for a worse kind of fixture list if you're in a...
Yeah, you're right. You've just mentioned those, but you've been in that position when you was at Bristol, right? Where you're near enough kind of accepted the fact that, you're going down. So how will those Palace players or managers be, one manager trying to motivate players to try and obviously maximise what they can between now and the end of the season, but also the players? What will it be like in that kind of environment, dressing room at the minute, given the position they're in?
Well, I think, to be fair to Crystal Palace, in the previous games that I've seen, they seem like a team that are still really together. They do show a lot of fight in them, a lot of desire to try and do the right things. They've also got a new manager who, like we have mentioned before, has a background in psychology. So hopefully he'll be utilising, obviously, his own experience and knowledge to try and cultivate that, that sense of belief to keep fighting, to keep going in every moment, in every game. I can only talk, obviously, last season when Bristol were in the league, I wasn't working with them then, but I know that there comes a point where, as a team, you probably do accept that your fortunes don't favour you, and that you are probably, the club is probably already looking ahead to the next season back in the Championship and what they need to do to retain players and recruit and kind of the different things they're going to have to put in place from an infrastructure point of view. But I think I can just talk about my experience when I was at Villa and we was in that relegation battle, and we had Arsenal final day, and we knew we just could not lose the game, right? And so we literally banked up like a wall, 2 walls of, bad players or whatever, because we were just like, we need to do everything possible to stop the likes of Vivian Miedema, Kim Little, top quality players. And literally it felt like we were going into a war zone, because that's how we approached the game, right? And that's all Crystal Palace, I think, can do in these moments, is just, try to deliver a game plan that will allow them the best chances of staying in those games, hoping that the likes of Chelsea, for example, who pretty much have, in our opinion, probably, won the league, might just do a bit what they did against West Ham and take their foot off the pedal a little bit, that they can get a result like that. But there's no words really to describe how you get yourself out of this situation, Fara. You just got to leave everything you possibly have from a mental and physical capacity on the pitch. And that's all you can do. Do your best, try your best, and hope that it's tough.
Yeah, it will be a tough, remaining 4 fixtures for them. But I mean, they've been, they actually have been a little bit of breath of fresh air in terms of, their approach to the games, having come up and, didn't bring that too many experienced players in, kind of kept the group together. I feel like, they've been in games, which is, something they certainly can build on if they are to go down into the Championship. But you mentioned the Hammers, they are in form, right? And we spoke early on in the season about when they weren't getting results, but they snatched a late point away at Chelsea at the weekend. You was actually on that game in comms. I heard you. I had you on. Don't worry. But Chelsea had actually 24 shots in that game, Neats, and only 5 on target. And normally a Chelsea team don't normally, create that many chances. We normally talk about how clinical Chelsea were, but clearly not, and certainly not in that first half. Do you reckon they were a little bit complacent? Do you reckon they used maybe all of their clinicalness against Manchester City midweek? What do you think happened to Chelsea, certainly, in that first half, and missed opportunities?
Yeah, I think, despite the fact that they have a squad full of depth, there's still probably some fatigue in some of those players that played in that game as well. Not just physically, but like mentally, because they put so much into that comeback to get that result against Manchester City. But they still dominated that first half against West Ham. They enjoyed a large majority of possession in West Ham's half. They were exploiting those pocket spaces. They had like Aaron Cuthbert pushing into that sort of 10 position, often with Nuskun as well. And they were finding, areas to exploit West Ham, especially in wide areas. They must have delivered, 19 crosses in that first half. But as you say, it just lacked a bit of quality in terms of the finishing and getting on the end of things. It wasn't a lack of desire or wanting to do, create opportunities. They did that. But yeah, I did feel that they were just a little bit, lackluster, if you like, compared to the previous games. But I put it down to the fact, like you say, they just put so much energy and fight and hunger and everything into that Manchester City match that they probably just didn't have the same kind of impetus to go again and step up and again. But credit to West Ham. It was an enjoyable game. I mean, you watched it from a spectator's point of view. I know, obviously, Chelsea, you're Chelsea blue, but for a game that I thought, wow, West Ham, like, you're not doing enough in this first half to give yourself a chance. They certainly showed up in the second half, and they got that all important goal, just before half time as well.
I think that was maybe a shift in momentum, wasn't it? You mentioned there that goal just before the half. I felt Chelsea were in cruise control in the game. Yeah, they had a lot of opportunities. Probably a little bit of that mental fatigue, having played, Manchester City 4 times in 12 days, unheard of. So to have somebody new play against somebody fresh, they actually looked excited to play in that, and you could see in the way that they started Chelsea, and certainly with their goals. But I think maybe that goal just before the half, 1, probably gave West Ham a little bit of confidence. 2, probably wrong timing for Chelsea. And I actually thought West Ham stuck it on Chelsea a little bit in the second half, which was enjoyable, for a neutral. Wasn't enjoyable for me, thinking Chelsea potentially could throw this game away. But I felt, half-time taking Willie Bright off. Very rare you see centre-halves being taken off in games. I think that was a bit of a, okay, why has Millie been taken off? Is it rest? Did they need to do that? Probably not. She's their, captain, leader, so to speak. I know she was a little bit, I'd say, herself and Charles in terms of at fault, in terms of positioning for the opening goal for West Ham. Yeah. But yeah, I was a bit surprised at that change. And then I just feel like sometimes with Chelsea, there's so many changes within the squad. And look, they have to use the depth of their squad. They're in every competition, of course they do. But sometimes I just feel like it does disrupt the rhythm of their play. It does get in the way of kind of that consistency in terms of performance. Yes, we know they have the mentality to get results in any fixture. But I do think, the changes that they constantly having to make probably doesn't help them. I don't know what you think of that. But I think in terms of the comeback and, the Chelsea rotation, for me, is causing them a few problems.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that the backroom coaching staff was certainly animated during that second half. They were, jumping and screaming at players to recover and get their counter pressure on. So they weren't best pleased, to be honest. But I think from a Chelsea point of view, having been a player that's been in a Chelsea team where a lot of rotation happens, it is very difficult to get that kind of momentum and rhythm when you've not played consistently, and you're trying to get that relationship and understanding between yourself and your teammates again, and keep that fluidity, it's really difficult. And not just that, because it's not just about the game at hand. All these players want to play. They're all good players. They all want to be starting regular players. So they're also probably got a bit of the pressure of, I need to perform. I want to perform and show Sonia that I want to break into the regular starting lineup. So with that, on top of that, sometimes, you want to do all the right things, but you end up overthinking what you're doing, or you're trying too hard, or you just, and it doesn't quite click in the way that you want it to. So yeah, rotation definitely is a difficult thing to manage, both as a manager and as players, because as a manager, Sonia has all this talent at her disposal. She wants to also manage them well physically, but she also wants to keep players, on side, happy to some degree, and you can't make all players happy all the time. So that's a difficult task for her, but that's the problem of being spoiled with all these riches in a team. Ultimately, and that's the challenge. But Shakira Martinez, I think, is just such an exciting young player. Like, I enjoyed watching her play. Like, everything positive that happened for West Ham, especially in the first half, was coming down her side, on the right-hand side. Second half, the way she took her goal, the quality, the movement, the time and the touch, everything, the confident finish, like, she just smashed that ball just the back of the net. Just shows you a player that is enjoying her football, but knows she knows the quality she has. And again, just alive. The second goal, arguably, a bit of a scrappy one or whatever, but she's there, she's alive, backstick to tuck it away. And to be honest, she gave us all sorts of problems when she played against us at 23s. So I had some experiences knowing kind of what she could deliver. And I think these signings have been a difference, absolutely, for West Ham, bringing players like her into the team. Asai being in good form, Ueki, who I think is also underrated, is a really top talent. So West Ham are definitely going in the right trajectory, and you can see that they have a lot to build on going into next season as well.
Yeah, I mean, their squad has certainly got some fantastic talent within it, and it was a case of how is that going to blend together to kind of get the results, and we're starting to see that now. But other results: Leicester drew to Tottenham, Man United, another clean sheet for Manchester United in their game against Everton, a howler from Courtney Brosmans, but I'm sure she won't be happy with. But yeah, they keep the pressure on at the top. We mentioned, obviously, Man City winning 2-1, and then Arsenal 4-0 winners. But that pretty much rounds up the weekend for us. We really just wanted to get into those two bottom teams that have kind of pulled away now from Crystal Palace. But we do have a few fans' questions, I believe. Neats?
We do indeed. The first question is from Nikolai Uli. I hope I'm saying that right. Apologies if not. What recruiting do Arsenal and Man City need to do in the summer to really challenge in 2025-26 season?
Yeah, I think they're difficult to answer. I think in terms of Arsenal, I think they potentially need another centre half, that extra bit of cover in that area. I think in terms of fullback areas, pretty comfortable. I think certainly midfield, lots of competition within that. Attacking areas, we know they create a lot of chances, been scoring a lot of goals. So I think potentially for me, Arsenal, maybe a centre half and another goalkeeper, Van Domsela. I know they bought her in the summer. Probably hasn't had the same season she had when she joined Aston Villa, but yeah, I think that's an area in terms of that competition in goal that Arsenal need. So I think they don't need much. I think certainly the form they've showed since Renée Slager's taken over, they look comfortable and they look like they can compete. For Manchester City, there's a lot of recruiting to do, I think. It looks like they're losing centre half, Alexandre. So I think in terms of that, and obviously we know Alex Greenwood will be returning from an injury. So I think centre half again in that area there, they certainly need to look at. And then I think if they are going to lose Chloe Kelly, or if Chloe Kelly's to return, I think those areas are okay. I think if they don't have Chloe Kelly back, that's an area. And then I think for Hasegawa, she plays a lot of minutes. I think, maybe a little bit of competition for her bring somebody in as backup. But I know they have another young Japanese player. I don't know her name, but I know they have somebody in that area already. Maybe it's about giving her a little bit more time. But maybe for Manchester City, it's more about just having a bigger squad. I feel like their squad hasn't been that big this season. But other than that, I don't think either team really needs to do too much work in the summer. What about yourself?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Farah. I think Arsenal definitely potentially a backup goalkeeper again, for a bit more competition in that role. I think they're pretty, they got a lot of depth in midfield. They got a lot of exciting attacking type players. I reckon they'd be keen to potentially keep Chloe Kelly if they can. But yeah, another centre back probably look to someone to come in there. But I think they've got all the right kind of pieces in place at the moment. So it's about getting off a good pre-season and getting off to a better rhythm than they did the start of this season. And then I think that, they have a real chance to compete for next season. In terms of Manchester City, I would say definitely a 6, Hasegawa, someone there that can come in and give her some respite, because she's had to play a lot of minutes and she's had to carry a lot of responsibility in a lot of important games this season. I think in wide areas, we've seen now with Firmino getting injured, you kind of need some backups for players that can come in and slot in there. They've got a lot of versatile players, but I think it's just about expanding the squad so that they can compete in all competitions in the same way that Chelsea and Arsenal do, retaining their best players. Obviously, they're going to need a replacement for Alexandri if the rumours are true. Yeah, but on the flip side of that, I would say that they've got some really exciting young players, and they are giving them more opportunities to play compared with some other clubs, you could argue, which is a positive thing. We're seeing Jess Park get a lot more minutes in that Manchester City team. Naomi Lazelle, Gracie Pryor, players that I guess the manager's been forced into these decisions, but they're getting that early exposure and they're actually competing, and they've done really well in a number of games. So it's just about expanding the squad. So yeah, I would agree. The next question is from Nick Seymour, and is player to watch from the Championship.
Ooh. It's a difficult one. You know what? It's difficult, but is it Jakobsen? I mean, in terms for London City Lionesses, I know they brought her in, and we know she's, a very experienced player. And Aslani as well. I know London City really did invest, in the summer and brought these, top international players into their squad. They put London City Lionesses in a fantastic position. The likes of those within the squad. And it looks as if London City can win the next 2 games and Birmingham can win the next 2 games, it goes down to the wire. Birmingham and London City last game of the season. So I mean that league in itself has been super exciting. I know there's some great. You'll know more than me, but I'm sure there's some really good young internationals within the Championship playing regularly. But I just think those two, I'd like to see them in the WSL again, Jakobsen and Aslani, and as I say, they have a great chance of doing that given the form and what they've brought to London City this year.
Yeah, I agree with you, Farah. I think it's been a really exciting Championship season. I believe, only something like 2 points between Birmingham City and Lionesses at the top. To be fair, both teams have experienced players that have played in the WSL previously. So, it'll be amazing to see one of these teams back and some of those faces that we've seen before back in that league, like Cho, for example, at Birmingham City. I think, a really talented midfielder, really technical player, has a lot of creativity and has been able to display that and be an impactful kind of player for Birmingham City in their kind of goal to try and get promoted again. And you mentioned that, 2 players there, Aslani, who we both know really well, Jakobsen. I mean, these are seasoned, experienced players, international players for Sweden, really dynamic players, and their whole objective was to go to London City to help them get promoted so that they could come back and compete, so that they can come up, and compete in the WSL. So I think that would be an exciting prospect to see. I've played with Asllani before myself, and I know that she is very competitive, very competitive. So she'll definitely want to be back in the league and showing the best of what she has to offer, as well as her leadership qualities. But yeah, those are definitely the players I would probably pinpoint as well.
Well, it's going to be an exciting end to the championship, that's for sure, and I'll be having a close eye on that. But I'm sure, in fact, I know London City Lionesses will definitely invest, because once they get into that WSL, they won't want to be dropping out, and they would have looked at teams previously come up and going straight back down. They won't want to be that team, and hopefully Birmingham, I believe they have a much better structure now. So if they are to get into WSL, they'll also, invest and want to keep themselves within the league. But guys, that's it for this week. Thanks for listening to BBB. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Also, as we say every single week, Neats, don't we? We never seem to get any topics in. If anyone wants us to talk about anything around the women's game, send us a message on Instagram or Twitter, and we'll certainly get onto those topics and discuss them. But other than that, thanks for listening. Neats, thanks again for today, and we'll be back next week.